So 4:30 update on Tropical Storm Beta. We do have some changes. Flash flood watches have been issued for coastal counties. Storm surge watch has been upgraded to a warning. And tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches remain in effect. The forecast intensity of Beta has been decreased slightly. So you can see the track here. Not a whole lot of change from the previous forecast. Beta is still analyzed to have winds at 60 miles per hour, moving near stationary, not really moving at all, but forecast to resume a slow westward movement and then maybe west-northwest as it approaches the Texas coast slowly. You can see the cone there. The 3-day cone is shaded in solid white, and then the 4 to 5 in that stippled area. And you can see the center of that cone would take the storm right into Matagorda Bay area. And we'll talk about this later on. That's probably our highest chance of the strongest winds. But we do have tropical storm watches along that blue line, really all of our coastal areas. And we are keeping that hurricane watch as well. Tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches just in case the storm does intensify over the next 2 or 3 days. But the thinking now from the Hurricane Center is more likely to remain a tropical storm. Here's a satellite picture of Beta, and what you see is a swirl of low-level clouds. Most of the thunderstorm activity is sheared off to the northeast, and it's a combination of this vertical wind shear and dry air that's sort of keeping Beta from intensifying. So those are kind of holding the intensity in sort of a strong tropical storm status, and that's most likely going to continue over the next few days. So that's a bit of good news, not really looking at much, if any, intensification of this system. However, we can't rule out a little bit of intensification. That's why there still remains that hurricane watch in case the storm does get its act together. It already is a strong tropical storm. Wouldn't take too much to bump it up to a Category 1 hurricane. Talk about this morning. The wind field is fairly large in terms of tropical storm force winds. We showed the wind forecast for this evening and tomorrow evening in the upper row, and then the seas forecast in the lower row. And what I want to point out is we have a very long fetch of tropical storm force winds sort of toward and parallel to the coast, and that's a recipe to push water up onto land. And we're already starting to see some coastal flooding along our coastline. And on the lower row there, notice those high seas, a lot of wave energy pounding into the coastline, the lower and mid-Texas coast, and up in our area as well. So that's going to sort of add on to the effect of the rising water. So we'll have higher mean level water plus surf on top of that for the Gulf-facing beaches. As far as timing of tropical storm force winds, this really hasn't changed much. Still looking at Sunday night for most areas, perhaps early Monday morning. It is going to start to get windier really for all our coastal areas as we go through the day tomorrow, and then tropical storm force winds perhaps arriving mostly Sunday night, first thing Monday morning. And you can see high probabilities, fairly high, 50% or greater across our whole area. Almost 70%, though, you can see an axis of highest values sort of pointing into Matagorda Bay. So that's kind of what we said earlier. It looks like that area, wherever that center tracks, is going to have the highest wind impacts. 50 knot or 58 mile per hour sustained winds. Notice again the axis of higher values pointing down the coast, sort of the mid-Texas coast, up into that Matagorda Bay area, and lower amounts as we work our way up the coast. So again, that's consistent with the idea of a strong tropical storm making its way toward perhaps the Matagorda Bay area, give or take a little bit on either side. with lower probabilities, but still not that small as you get up further north toward Galveston Bay. So we certainly still could get those strong tropical storm force winds up the coast too, but the greatest chances are down there, Matagorda, Jackson County, places like that. What about hurricane force wind probabilities? These are on the low side. You can see 5 to 10% really from Brazoria County down across Matagorda Bay, and then 10 to 20% just offshore, and then less than 5% farther up the coast. So again, this is based on this storm sort of remaining as strong tropical storm, and in just a chance that it could get its act together and intensify a bit to a hurricane. So that's a little bit of good news. Not really expecting any kind of rapid intensification with this one. Tides still a big issue. Already seeing tides coming up now. Some minor coastal flooding being reported by emergency managers. And let's look at some of the latest tide forecasts. If you look at the upper right, there's Galveston Bay entrance. And what are we looking at here? The red line indicates the observed tide observations. And then looking ahead at the black line, that's the forecast based on this surge model. The gray shading around the black line is sort of an error bar built in. So it gives you kind of a range of possibilities. So what are we seeing for Galveston Bay entrance? As we get into the evening with the next high tide, we're looking at values between 4.5 and 5 feet above mean lower low water. So that coastal flooding that we're getting right now is just going to get worse as we get into the evening. And then tomorrow morning, look at those values. In the mean, above 5 feet, but really a range between about 4.5 and 6. And you see those high tides continue Sunday night into Monday. What happens beyond Monday is really dependent on the track of the storm, but we still think they're more likely to stay up if we do get a track up the coast. So there is a drop-off in the model, but we're not necessarily buying into that. And then you can look at the same data relative to mean higher high water, and there we're looking at ranges between 3 and 4 feet. By the way, the brown line indicates storm surge, which is the difference between the astronomical tide and the forecast tide, and you can see that's getting up to around 4 feet above normal. Freeport, same idea. A big rise as we get into the evening. We'll likely see more and more coastal flooding tonight, and then especially with tomorrow's high tides, they're up around or above 5 feet by Sunday evening. Even the possibility of getting above 6 feet based on the ranges seen there. And then as we get later in the week, it's going to depend a lot on the track and intensity of beta, but we still think more likely than not it should stay high. Matagorda Bay entrance. Remember, this is going to be closest to the center track, and right now the wave model is showing about 4 to 5 feet above mean lower low water. But given the waves that are contributing, effectively the values are going to be higher than this on all Gulf-facing beaches. The wave action adds as a big, effectively another foot or two even, and so we would expect quite a bit of beach erosion and coastal flooding along the Gulf Coast. Eagle Point, again, these are high values, probably even a bit higher than we saw with Laura. Eagle Point, by tomorrow morning, we're looking at values above 4 feet, perhaps as high as 5 feet, and then look at that high tide Sunday night, on average about 5 feet, perhaps in the 4.5 to 6 foot range. So there's some play there, some uncertainty. And then if you look at it relative to mean higher high water, which is essentially the depth of water over low-lying areas that are normally dry, the values are in that 3 to 5 foot range, on average 4 feet. So very significant coastal flooding setting up over the next 36 hours. Pier 21, more of the same. Coastal flooding starting really now and then getting worse tomorrow and Monday. And then beyond Monday, it'll depend on the track and intensity of beta, but we think those levels will stay up even through the middle of the week. And this is from the Hurricane Center, sort of a big picture of the storm surge, the values relative to mean high water, 2 to 4 feet over a large area of coastline extending really all the way up into Louisiana. So even if beta remains a tropical storm and no stronger than that, there's other factors at work here, this large area of northeast winds, and that's leading to these high surges all along the Gulf Coast over quite a large area, and this minor to moderate coastal flooding. On the right-hand side in the darker purple, you see a storm surge warning has been issued, so this is an upgrade from the watch we saw earlier. All right, I'm going to jump past this here. I want to take a look now at the storm total rainfall forecast, valid really tomorrow through Thursday. And as we get closer and as we have more confidence in the track, we start to consider the amount of rainfall from this slow-moving tropical system. So this assumes that the storm makes landfall down near Matagorda Bay and then kind of drifts up the coastline. And slow-moving tropical systems, as you know, can lead to very high amounts of rain. So right now, the best estimate is 15 to 20 inches of rain near the coast in that purple area, and 10 to 15 with locally higher in the next set of counties inland. And then you can see how there's significant rain even farther inland, 6 to 10 inches, and then that drops up as we get farther and farther inland. But this is quite a lot of rain, obviously, and this would lead to perhaps some significant flooding, flash flooding and flooding in general. There is still a lot of uncertainty. The Weather Prediction Center wanted to emphasize that point. It will be track dependent. If the storm, for example, were to just track further inland, that would adjust things and further to the east as well. So, but we're starting to get more and more confidence enough to start to put some values on a map here. And here's a look at the flash flood risk over the next 3 days. And this will address some of the questions that have just come in to chat. When is this rain threat? If you look at what are we looking at here? These are basically flash flood risk areas, where the area in red is moderate, the area in yellow is slight, and the area in green is marginal. So on the left-hand panel, that's sort of for the life of the event. And you can see a moderate risk for those coastal counties, as we might expect, looking at the potential for 15 to 20 inches of rain. And then this is broken down day by day in the column on the right. So day 1 tonight through Sunday morning, not really a flash flood concern. But as we go through the day tomorrow into tomorrow night, you can see the day 2 here, we've got some marginal to slight chances along the coast. And then even greater Monday to Tuesday morning. So basically, we're looking at some rain pushing in during the day tomorrow, building in from the Gulf, perhaps some rain bands. And so that's why our flash flood watch starts tomorrow. But the threat of flash flooding is only going to increase from there. And, probably the greatest chances being Monday through and Tuesday. Could even extend beyond that, depending on the track. If it's just meandering along the coast, we'll have additional days, unfortunately, of heavy rain. Or if it tracks a little quicker, then it might be out of our area by late in the week. Tornado potential. This was asked on the morning call. The Storm Prediction Center has issued a marginal risk of severe weather and tropical tornadoes for Monday, and for the areas in green shown there. Marginal typically will correspond to isolated tornado development. So you can see, again, it's the coastal counties that have that risk, and we'll keep an eye on the convective outlooks as we get closer. So just to sum up, and I appreciate these questions coming in, minor to moderate coastal flooding is already starting. Minor already starting, and it's going to become moderate as we go through tonight and tomorrow along the bays and the Gulf. And these elevated high tides are expected to continue through at least the early part of the week. Beyond that, it will depend on the track and intensity of beta. At these levels, some main roads are flooded and also many low-lying areas. Not mentioned here is the high surf and the potential to essentially add on to the flood and erosion that will occur with these high water levels. So Gulf-facing beaches are going to have both the high water and the heavy surf. Heavy rain and flash flooding may occur with this slow-moving tropical system. Again, we're getting a little more confident now in the tracks sort of up the coast or maybe just inland. And that's a recipe, of course, for very heavy rain, especially for the coastal counties. But we could still get some high amounts even fairly far inland. And the potential up to 20 inches locally is our best guess at this point from this multi-day event. Gusty winds also expected along the coast, likely to tropical storm force. Highest winds near landfall, possibly near Matagorda Bay. But of course, there's still some uncertainty exactly where that center comes in. Also, can't rule out hurricane force winds, although this now appears less likely. And our confidence is crept up a little bit. Certainly, our confidence is relatively high for this moderate coastal flood event setting up for late tonight, tomorrow, and Monday at least. Still a little bit lower confidence for the rainfall forecast and the track itself. But we're more confident now enough to issue flash flood watches for part of the area. So that's kind of a quick summary. I did want to show you a few other things. This is actually from HurrEvac, which we talked quite a bit about with, I believe it was Laura or maybe Hannah. But this has a nice feature in that it will show you the cone, but also it'll plot the intensity over time. And so what you're seeing here is September 22nd at 1 a.m. That would be the early morning hours on Tuesday. 70-mile-per-hour winds curling up into Matagorda Bay potentially. Of course, there is an error cone here, so the track is not necessarily going to be on that center line, but it gives you an idea of the sequence. Perhaps high tropical storm force winds, can't rule out a hurricane in this general area here. And then curling up the coast, maybe tracking just inland of the coast with winds decreasing as they move up the coast. So that's kind of the most likely scenario, but we can't rule out some shifts in this track over time. Also wanted to show very quickly the different watches and warnings in effect. In this sort of purple area, we have tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches and storm surge warnings for these coastal areas. Just inland, we do have tropical storm warnings now for the next set of counties inland for the potential of tropical storm force winds within 48 hours. And then including all these areas plus this next row inland in green, we have a flash flood watch starting on Sunday morning, continuing through Tuesday, which may end up having to be extended. We'll just see how that goes. So there's a quick summary of the weather situation there. I'm going to go ahead and